All right, in studio we have Chris Anderson from the Mahoning County Democratic Party. How are you, Chris?
Good, good. I wish this weather would decide what it was going to do because it's clogging all my sinus. It's clogging my sinuses.
Yeah, you
up,
sound a little
but
stuffy.
Yeah, every time the weather goes from being relatively warm to cold back to a normal temperature, this happens to me. So I'm not actually sick or anything, just kind of miserable. But
Consequence of living in Northeast Ohio, where this time of year it's a little rough on everybody's sinuses.
yeah, my poor wife gets it a lot worse than I do. But it's just wish it would make its mind up. So it is almost winter, so it's probably about time to act like it.
Yeah, but we could use a little bit of sun, though. I think that's the big thing when it gets dreary like that. Everybody gets grumpy, and
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right,
That's a
so
good point.
what we're talking about this week is we're bringing sort of like community leaders down here to talk about YSU, the president, the way that everything kind of went down. And I have a lot of respect for you and what you do for the community and how you're connected with everyone. So I wanted to get your take on it and some of your input on, kind of where we go from now, where we go from this point forward.
Yeah.
And so kind of give me your summary from your perspective as the chairman of the Democratic Party. What are your feelings on everything?
Yeah. So, so first off, thanks for the kind words. I always appreciate that. I try to be as engaged with everybody as I can. So from my end, the first thing that everybody always wants to know about is what the plans are for the special election that'll likely happen. So for folks who don't know, Governor DeWine, when there are vacancies in office, they usually get filled in a variety of ways. Political parties appoint some bodies appoint themselves, things like that. With this specific situation, Governor DeWine would call a special election. I'll be honest with you, the district is so gerrymandered that it's not a priority for the party. It's nearly an R plus 20 district. And that's how you get somebody like Bill Johnson, who's able to camp out there for 20 years with no legislative accomplishments to his name. So that's the first thing. I always just like to get that out of the way. So in my specific case, I do have some serious concerns with the process, and that's exactly what my concerns are with. It's not obviously, I'm not going to shy away from saying that I don't think that Bill Johnson's the right person for it, but I would have a problem with this process regardless of who they'd hired. They did it in secret. From my understanding, I haven't gotten through the entirety of it yet, but the report that concerned alumni released yesterday really sheds a lot of light on the fact that they did a lot of this behind closed doors that should have been in public. They were not truthful about the constituent groups that they involved. They keep bringing up, he was the consensus of constituent groups. Turns out he only actually met with one group, and there were no students involved. They were just faculty. So that's my problem with it, man. Is that he's a guy who's done nothing but criticize higher education, who has no qualifications to lead a university, and I'm just worried about the damage that it's going to do to our valley. To be honest with you, YSU is one of I would have to check the statistics. It's one of, if not the biggest employer in the valley.
100%.
And even aside from that, I don't have to tell you, all the major employers in the valley are also dependent on they're dependent on the students that YSU produces.
Yeah.
And that's my concern. I'll be honest with you. I'm a YSU alumni. I've got 2 degrees from there. My wife's got degrees from there. We used to be contributors to the university until this happened. It's, my concern is with the process, like I said, because, again, I have my own personal feelings about Bill Johnson, but at the end of the day, the fact that, that a body that is, for one, bound by some sorts of public meeting laws did all this behind closed doors is just really, really troubling.
Yeah, and I, before this, I think when Tressel was president, we paid attention a little bit because of the name that he carried. But before that, I had no idea how the president came to be in the first place, because
Sure.
It didn't make the national news, and no one was really talking about it. In fact, I could probably only tell you, was it Sweet who was before Tressel as the president? And it was one of those positions where they didn't play a big role in
Right.
what was going on. It was just kind of like a very, low key type of position. So, but I guess you bring a personality that brings a little bit of radio activity to it. Now all of us are.
Well, and I think that part of it is, we're definitely living in probably, I mean, in my 35 years of life, this is the most polarized I've ever seen, that I've ever seen things. I can, as the party chair, I can go out and I can tell you that the sky's blue, and you're going to get half of these folks who just, they see that I'm a Democrat and they're like, oh no, sky's red. So it's the most polarized. So you're right there that that this is just that you're right there that there's a lot more attention because of who it is, but there's also a lot more attention because of what he is, though. I mean, you're talking about a guy who, and again, these are all things that that are verifiable facts, not personal feelings here. You're talking about a guy who's openly criticized higher education on multiple occurrences. Basically said that that it's just a place to breed, I forget how he worded it, to something about liberal indoctrination. I don't know, whatever the talking point at that point in time was. You're talking about a guy who's said things like that. You're talking about a guy who voted against certifying an election. He's a literal election denier. Also very troubling is you're talking about a guy who wants to lead an incredibly diverse university in one of the most diverse places in Ohio, who voted against the Equity Enforcement Act. So what he says and what he did are two different things. I'm a big thing of I can't swear here, can I?
Oh, do it.
Oh, okay.
Do
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of. I don't really give a shit what you say. I want to talk about what you've done. And for one, you've got no legislative accomplishments, despite the fact you camped out here. So you can't even make the argument that you've got all this government experience. Like, your government experience is voting however the Republican caucus told you to. And then two, you've got a guy who all of those votes have been things that would have been incredibly detrimental to Youngstown State University had he gotten his way. And that's really what concerns me, is how he was hired and what he is. Again, I don't know the guy personally. I've only met him a handful of times, but I do know his voting record. I do know the things that he said, and all of it is incredibly troubling.
Okay, and so I mean, and I think that's really fair, and I think what you said earlier, that if they went about it the wrong way, or at least, I wouldn't even say the wrong way, I would say they made it very difficult for the public just to accept it. If it happened like you said it did, behind closed doors, didn't appeal to the public, felt kind of sneaky, happening in the middle of the night kind of
right.
stuff.
It felt like they were hoping nobody was going to pay attention, and they were just going to be able to hire him, and everybody was going to go on with their day, and that's truthfully too. That's one of the reasons that that good journalism is so important too. Is had journalists not paid so much attention to it, they probably would have gotten away with just doing it. So.
Now, is the hope that with the student body and with the union and with the people that are critical of this, is to stop it from happening? Does it look like that it has a chance that the outcry brings us to a halt and they go in a different direction? Or do you think it's kind of solid at this point where he's going to be the president of YSU?
Yeah, I mean, I truthfully, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I think that each group is hoping for a different outcome. I think the ultimate goal is that they would go back, and even if you want to include them in the search, great. Let's talk about the other candidates too. You're not just hiring a guy who's just going to serve a board of trustees. You're hiring a guy who's going to serve thousands of people that you need, that's going to be able to attract faculty, that's going to be able to attract funding. I mean, Johnson's one of the worst fundraisers in Congress, and he's ran unopposed. How is he going to raise for a university now too? If you can't raise money as an incumbent congressman, there's really something wrong. So that's troubling in and of itself.
Now the role of president, is it a fundraising capacity? What's the job function of that?
Yeah, so I think that each president of a university takes a little bit of a different role. I think that presidents prior to Tressel probably did more of like the hybrid, like academic administration, running the university, fundraising type roles. Because prior to President Tressel, to my understanding, the ones that I remember off the top of my head were all doctors in something. They were all PhDs in something. So they came from the academic world, right. Whereas President Tressel was more on the revitalization, fundraising, rejuvenating campus life, but then also had a very strong academic provost. You also have to remember too, President Tressel had a background in higher education. People keep trying to point to, oh, well, Jim Tressel didn't come from academia. I mean, you're not wrong. Right before this, he was helping run student life at Akron University, and he also had a master's in higher education administration. Plus, he ran one of the largest college football programs in the country, where he had to regularly work with universities, all those things. Bill Johnson's only, from what I can glean from his background, his only qualification for running a university is that he's attended one. So that's so God, I got so far off on a tangent.
No,
I don't remember what the hell you asked me.
And it wasn't a fair question to ask you to what's the reason that what the president does.
Yeah. So I think that if you looked at every university in the state of Ohio, each one of their presidents probably has a different role. What would Bill Johnson's role be? You know what I mean? He's not a coalition builder. He's not going to rejuvenate campus life. The votes that he's taken in Congress and the things that he's said publicly, it shows that he doesn't really even place a value in higher education.
Yeah, and I'd be interested if they put the position into that recruitment service, whatever they use to find them, like what was the the qualifications? What were they really looking for to do? I'd be interested to see what those were.
I think again, I'm not like a point the finger conspiracy theorist type, but the fact that they've yet to release who the other finalists were, it's probably pretty telling that they were either more qualified than he is, or just simply don't exist. And again, that's me, that's me just saying that, just as an opinion. I don't, if I were them, I would have released who the other finalists were, because everybody's been asking about it. Or I would have simply had the search in public the way that it should have been done, and we would all these concerns would have been dissuaded anyways.
Yeah, and I think it's important that if we got a feeling of ickiness with the way that things went down, that we need to over communicate. So those questions, and I'm not a real big fan of the buzzwords and how it's being framed in the media, because all it's doing is doing more polarization. If we want to know the details and the data, we want commitments, and we want real language. I think we got to get less stump speech and more if we got to get to know the dude, and we're going to trust that he's going to do a job there, because we rely on that he's got to do a great job. If he comes into town and hits that position, he's got to recruit students, he's got to do fundraising and all of that.
I mean, for $500,000 a year and all those fringe perks they're giving him, he better be damn good at this.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and I'm libertarian, so the First Amendment side of this is really exciting to me. I love when something happens that creates more conversation about things that we weren't paying attention to yesterday. Yep. So we have this opportunity to really bring out more, more higher resolution on this whole thing to begin with.
Sure. And truthfully, I hope that folks are between the August issue 1 that got everybody's attention, between this, I hope that this continues to draw people's focus to things that they don't normally pay attention to. Because that's partially, just taking the partisan cap off, but that's partially how, if you ever hear about government corruption and things like that, it's a lot of times because nobody's been paying attention.
And in your world, apathy is probably the killer, when people just are like, meh, about what's going on. And
yeah, there's a few of them, but yeah, apathy is definitely at the top of that list. Folks get, they get discouraged with the process. They don't think that the number one thing that I always hear is, oh, well, one vote's not going to matter. Well, okay, well, if 1 million people say that, what do you think is going to wind up happening? So yeah, apathy is just terrible, and apathy is just terrible for the democratic process. Not not just my political persuasion, but all political persuasions.
Yeah. All right, so let's hit the pause button on the criticism leading up to it. Let's just go forward. Let's assume that whatever they do, he's going to be the president, and then if we can figure out what we could demand to make sure that this works out to the advantage of the community and the students and the faculty and everything, the technologies and the fundraising. Let's talk about what you would say. Here's what is important that you are, no matter where you were before. You were a legislator and now you're the president. What's your demands? What do you think he needs to do?
So as an alumni, because again, I feel a little qualified to talk about this because I've gone to YSU. You need to continue to grow. He needs to continue to grow the campus life. If you're going to attract new students, you have to have things happening there. It has to be vibrant. You need to continue to grow. You need to continue to grow things like the arts. Study after study shows that regions that get rejuvenated around the country. So, think like former industrial towns, right? Like steel towns, things like that. They all have incredibly vibrant art scenes. That comes from somewhere. Obviously there are plenty of artists that, that they don't have any formal training or anything along those lines, but there are plenty that do. So we need to continue to support those programs. Everything, and again, you're talking to a guy who's got an MBA, everything can't be a literal program. Everything can't be an MBA, everything can't be a law degree. It can't be programs in healthcare. No matter, like, if you enjoy the arts, someone has to be able to teach that. If you want your kid to learn the arts, someone has to be able to teach that. And you can't just come in and immediately gut those. So those would be two of the demands. And then
that's the last time around when Tressel was still there, the criticism was that some of those underperforming ones were just taken out of the curriculum completely.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting that we add some of those back in to make
it's
them
not necessarily
well-rounded.
it's not necessarily adding them back in, because at the end of the day, if you do take an objective look at something and it's not sustainable, I understand.
Right.
But you can't come in and start gutting things because you don't personally see the value in them. And I think that's a lot of people's fear around someone like him is, he's made it abundantly clear through the things that he said. Like these aren't just, they're not assumptions. These are through the things he's said. He's made it abundantly clear that he doesn't value the things that make institutions of higher learning institutions of higher learning. It's not just about the literal course curriculum you're going to take. It's about learning things like critical thinking. It's about learning to interact with people that you don't always agree with. There's a lot more that goes into it that he's just made it abundantly clear he doesn't see the value in. So those would be two of them, and then he's got to be able to attract faculty. University is only as strong as the faculty that teach there. You obviously you need the adjunct faculty, you need the professionals that teach there, but you also need the folks who eat, sleep, and breathe academia, who do the research that drives the innovations that are behind a lot of
and technology.
And just as a personal aside, as a guy who you've regularly seen in Congress, deny science, like things like climate change and things like that. I don't know how you attract a scientist I don't know how you attract a scientist to come work for you when you've regularly degraded what it is that they do.
Well, do you think the university takes on the personality of the president, or do you think you can disconnect that and say the guy's working the job rather than the university becomes part of who he is?
I mean, so if you think about what YSU was before President Tressel, it was a lot of traditional higher education, right? Like come and get your 4-year degree, and it was also they'd embrace that role as a commuter school, right?
Right.
So then you have a president like President Tressel who comes in and he's experienced the vibrant campuses like Ohio State, who's been around higher education for basically his entire adult life, minus the football parts of it, the playing parts of it, I should say. And he develops a different vision. So I do think that it's fair to say that, because for folks who've got to meet him, like you could tell that he enjoyed what he was doing, that he enjoyed interacting with the students, that he enjoyed helping. The big thing that he did is all of the capital campaigning that he did to further grow the university. You have a guy that his very presence there has caused donors to take their money out of the capital portion of it and put it into scholarships.
Right.
A big thing. I've tried to really, as a personal philosophy, embrace assuming folks have personal intent, or not personal intent. I'm sorry, positive intent.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how he has positive intent here, given the things that he said. I think that my personal feeling is that he's being brought in to essentially be the guy who guts the programs that they didn't want to gut, because of all the other stuff that had happened already. So I mean, that's my personal feeling
Right.
about this, and I hope that that's not the case, because if so, when YSU not embraces, but takes on the personality of its president, that's gonna be incredibly problematic. The other reason that I don't necessarily know if something like that is gonna hold true here is because I've never seen an organized resistance to something the way that I've seen folks stand up and say, we don't want this. This wasn't right. You have bipartisan business leaders that have said, I'm not giving you more money, or that are resigning from boards, or you've got probably one of the best organized student responses I've ever seen. Yesterday, they put through 2 resolutions through the academic senate saying, we don't believe that we don't have any confidence in your ability to do this. It's an incredibly organized resistance, and I don't think that, there's that old quote about not going quietly into the night. I think that that's the case here, is that, if the board does continue to go forward with hiring Bill Johnson, I don't think that you've seen the last of any sort of resistance to this, because the one thing that we've seen since 2016, when a lot of folks got engaged in the political process, is they don't stop paying attention. So, if the board's hope here is that they're going to take some flack now, hire him, and then it's going to be business as usual, I think they're sadly mistaken.
Yeah, and that's where I hope that they'll engage back and say, okay, well, yeah, it was a rough start where we went and chose to do those kind of things, but now it's open table. We'll sit down with a bunch of people. We'll hear concerns and
that would take a coalition builder, though, and again, 20 years in Congress shows that's not him. The guy was essentially unopposed and was still running ads was still running advertising that was, degrading a different political persuasion just for the sake of doing it. Like, you're not talking about a moderate guy here. You're talking about one of the guys that normal moderate people turn their heads up at and say, oh, this, I almost said something that this guy, you know what I mean? Like that normal sensible people would stop and be like, no, that's not normal.
Yeah, and he used this word a couple times, and then you kind of used polarization and indoctrination, and I hate these buzzwords because all they do is elicit some kind of response, and we don't really know what anybody's talking about.
Right.
So and you and I will talk. I plan on talking with Bill Johnson and asking him this specific question about it, but. To me, academics should not be anything about an ideology. It should be the thing that talks about ideology and balances ideology and has great ideas from all ideologies. And what I heard when he used that term, indoctrination, is that somehow the university was persuading students into the ideology, and he wanted to break that, right? He wanted to get rid of it, make it solely academics and decoupled from an ideology. Thoughts?
I mean, this is one of those points where, and I'm thankful that I'm not under, I'm thankful that I can swear in these situations, because to be honest with you, that's just a bunch of bullshit. That's what that is. Again, it just goes to show how disconnected from YSU or even academia that Bill Johnson is, because as someone who went through YSU, I'm here to tell you that I was presented with different viewpoints, especially in the business college. I was presented with more progressive viewpoints. I was presented with more conservative viewpoints. And then you're essentially, you make up your own mind, but at the end of the day, objective is objective, especially in the programs that I went through, and that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about a lot of folks who come out of college are a little bit more progressive. That's just something he doesn't like. That's not indoctrination. Like, again, it's like it's like you're saying, folks use that as a buzzword. I've heard conservative indoctrination. I've heard liberal indoctrination. At the end of the day, it's just something you don't like, and you're trying to find a term for it. It's not indoctrination because somebody doesn't agree with you.
Right.
So, and that's again, what's troubling.
Well, that's why I want to know what he meant by that. Like, what did that mean? And if I were to go de-indoctrinate, what am I doing? Like, what's the purpose?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sounds like, just, again, based off of his track record, it sounds like he hopes to drive out faculty that he doesn't agree with. Which is in and of itself incredibly troubling because especially when you're talking about training a workforce, you need everybody's viewpoint. I know that I'm the chair of a political party, but it's never stopped me from having difficult conversations with people. It's never stopped me from talking about how, look, the way that I've always looked at things is, until we got into this recent state of politics where, everything has to be everything has to pass everybody's litmus test. No matter what political persuasion you were, you wanted the same things for your communities. You wanted safer communities. You wanted better communities. You wanted to leave things a little better than they were for you, for your children. You just had different ideas on how to get there. And then what happened is, as folks like him came and they made it about, well, no, I don't agree with your ideas, so you're wrong. You need to get out of here. It's not, okay, well, let's have a conversation and I feel bad for a lot of the, and I say younger, it makes me feel old as hell to say younger people, but I have a 21-year-old sister, right? She's never gotten to see an era of normal politics where it was, I have different ideas than you, so let's sit down and find a compromise and move forward. Now it's, oh, well, no, that's your idea. I can't listen to that idea. My vote, my base of people don't like that. Like, that's not the way that things here are supposed to work. I look at, one of the best examples of this, right, is Joe Schiavone when he was in the Ohio Senate. Now Judge Joe Schiavone, but when Joe was the minority leader in the Ohio Senate, he introduced a bill for rural broadband. Almost every General Assembly, he introduced this bill to expand rural broadband. The minute that Joe was out of the General Assembly, a Republican introduced that bill and they passed it. It wasn't, they liked his idea, they didn't like that his name was on it. That's the problem with the modern state of politics. And that's why I tell people, and that's what you see at these higher levels of politics, especially the federal level, is it's just theatrics. So when you want to actually really impact change, you need to do it at this local level. And that's why it's so encouraging to see all of these people paying attention finally to something like a presidential search for Youngstown State University. Because when you really, really want to drive change, it happens here. It doesn't happen at the federal level. That's why, the Congress could barely elect its own speaker. Like, they could barely determine who was going to lead the U.S. House of Representatives. Like, they're clearly not going to accomplish anything, but your local lawmakers absolutely can. They can directly impact your life, and that's why, again, I'm just so glad that people are really paying attention now to who those local lawmakers are.
Yeah, but I mean, your profession means that you got to operate in that space where there's gymnastics and the game that's being played, and you have to dance the dance in order to do things. If that's the status quo, how do you change things so that? How can you even make it different? Is it just model it on the local level and hopefully it gets to the state and national level?
Well, so I'm going to be honest with you, and this is going to be a really wonky answer for you, is that you're never going to change the national level until you eliminate the filibuster. Reason I say that is because everything has such a hyper-partisan divide. You can put whatever you want through the U.S. House of Representatives, and it's dead in the Senate. They don't agree on anything. Much less you're never going to get, if you right now the Senate's 50-50, and then Kamala Harris goes and breaks ties. Even if you got 54-45, still not passing anything because you need 60. Even if you got 59-41, still not passing anything. You need 60. So that gives them the leeway to to continue to do things like, these partisan shows is, essentially what they are. So I think what you have to, so that's the answer to that problem. Right. Because again, we can sit here and we can talk about all that all day, but until you fix that and until you fix gerrymandering, and that's why I'm so excited about this independent redistricting commission, the prospect of that passing, because that's truly how you fix democracy, is with an independent redistricting commission.
But see, the thing is, like, I've been hearing
most people don't care about that, though.
Well, I've been hearing that since I was a kid, and it's almost like one of those things that can never get done because no matter what, you got that concession thing we talked about. Nobody's willing to go off of their side,
right? And that's why again, the Republicans are guilty of gerrymandering, Democrats are guilty of gerrymandering. It's gone on too long, and it's really screwed our country up. Because when you only have to appeal to those fringes of your supporters, because the only way you would ever lose an election is from somebody more hyper-partisan than you, you never run the risk of losing a general election, so all you've got to worry about is somebody who's more partisan than you are coming in and making a better partisan case. That's how things get broken. So when you look at things like, so so in 2015 we passed the anti-gerrymandering initiative, right? We saw that we still put trust into these legislators in Columbus to follow the law as we wrote it, right? So what did they do? They went and they found every loophole they could. Then when the Ohio Supreme Court said, no, this is still wrong, they ignored them 5 times. They punted the ball, and they went and swung the majority of the court to agree with them, right? That's exactly what they did. So it's almost, and you've got kids, so I can make this example. I can use this example with you. How many times do you let your kids burn you on something before you take that responsibility away from them, right? Like how many?
Twice, maybe.
Well, so they tried to do it 5 times just with the Ohio Supreme Court. Then they tried to pass a constitutional amendment so that asking you to voluntarily give up your ability to address the government through the constitutional amendment process. That's essentially what they were doing, was just asking you to give that up on your own. Like, they don't want to be accountable to anyone, and the reason that I bring that up is because you can't, if you treat the legislature like they truly work for you. You only give somebody a responsibility and trust them with it until they show you that they can't be trusted with it. They've shown us time and time again they can't be trusted with it. It's time to take it away, and that's what the Independent Redistricting Commission does. Is it's going to take that away from folk. It's going to take that away from the legislators, and it's going to create a truly bipartisan commission of, I believe, and I have not read the final text of the amendment, but I believe it's 5 Dems, 5 Republicans, and then 5 independent voters that would, I believe, also comprise of the minor political parties too. And they will sit down and draw districts because, again, we've shown that legislators can't do it. Legislators have shown they can't do it themselves, that they can't be trusted. And again, the reason that I bring that up is because once you fix gerrymandering, everything else becomes easy. Because then you're talking about getting back to a state where you've got a really representative democracy. Like so Ohio. So when Doug Jones was here in 2022, I was talking to him, and he was like, your General Assembly seems hell bent to turn you into Alabama, where he's from. And I stopped and I thought about it, and I was like, wow, that's really accurate. They do. So whether it's there or whether it's, I heard somebody call us Florida Light the other day. But then you look at things like issues 1 and 2 this past election cycle, right? So you can clearly see that the way that our legislature governs is not representative of who Ohio is. And that's what gerrymandering has done. So once we restore truly representative democracy, and we stop letting politicians pick their voters and start letting voters pick their politicians, that's when the real change happens, and that's when I think even more people wake up. But for now, until we fix everything at the federal level, like I said, the biggest way that we turn things around and get more people engaged at the local level is just creating opportunities for them to do it. That's why I think that and to be engaged in those processes, not even just to run for office and things like that themselves, but to be engaged in those because there's plenty of people that never want to run for office. Believe me, as someone who has to recruit people to run for office, I'm here to tell you there's tons of engaged people that don't want to run. Yeah. But like I said, the more opportunities that we create for folks to be engaged in the process, whether it's shows, whether it's individuals going and and live stream. This was a big point of contention in Poland, I think, right? Is people going and live streaming general sessions or something like that, right? Of the, like, why is that an issue? I don't understand. Why do you not want people to be able to watch those meetings? Exactly. Everybody can't be there at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. You know what I mean? Or at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. Why I don't understand why it's an issue to create this open setting for folks to be able to watch.
Yeah, and I think that
the only reason I bring that up is because, again, I think that it comes with embracing a lot of the change that folks like that normal everyday people are trying to create, finding spaces for them to do that, and that's and the more that you do that, the more engaged people become.
Yeah, and I think it creates a lot of chaos in the interim. Like, we're solving a problem, and you're gonna when you start looking at something that nobody's been looking at before, you are sure to get new criticisms and making havoc happen and make people's jobs a little harder than they were before. But in the end, if we sort of like all agree that we like to have transparency into things, so people are on their best behavior, right? Then we, from the beginning, build that into our our system, so that what happened over at YSU is an easier process because
Right.
you would have been able to levy every concern and criticism before decisions were being made.
Right. And now, and I mean, and now it's like they're trying to just, YSU, it's like they're trying to just force people to accept a decision that they had no part in. You wanted one of the easiest ways to get buy-in on any kind of change you make, whether it's a corporate change or, whether it's any change, is to make people feel included in the process. Like, so if you wanted to hire Bill Johnson, great. Why not? If you're so damn convinced that he's the guy that you need to lead YSU, why didn't you just let the public process play out? Why not let him compete against other people for that, for that public sentiment, the way that every other president of the university has? I look back at the hiring of President Tressel. Like everybody knew that that's who everyone wanted, but they still went through the process because it was the process. The whole reason that these processes exist is because they create some semblance of stability, right? Like there's this leadership theory that folks will take bad news from you as long as they feel like the process was fair. I've yet to find one person who's felt like this process was fair. So, again, if that's the guy that you wanted and you're so convinced he's who we need, let him make his case publicly. I mean, Christ, the guy's been a politician for 20 years. He should be pretty fucking good at it by now. Oops, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to drop the F-bomb here or not.
Good. But I think, journalists have that opportunity to push on that question until you get a good answer. I mean, I heard the answer, and if I were a journalist sitting there, that would have not satisfied an answer to my question by any means.
Right. Right. No, and I'm with you. I think that around here we do have some really good journalists. But occasionally, there's a question that you do wish would have got pushed on a little bit more. And the problem with the fact that now he's essentially hiding is that no one has the opportunity to ask that again. Every time that I read an article about, his office was called for comment and they said they had no comment or they couldn't be reached or what? How's that a thing? You know what I mean? Like, you're smack dab in the middle of an organization that you want to lead, going through a gigantic crisis like this, and you already can't be found. Yeah. I mean, what you're Ted Cruz flying to Mexico in the middle of a storm? Like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like, people aren't going to forget here. You know what I mean? Like, we in around this area, like there are some organizations that folks essentially treat like extensions of their family, and YSU is one of them. I think all of us can say we've been positively impacted by YSU in some capacity, so everybody has an attachment to this issue, and everybody's got an attachment to it, and they've got a vested interest in it. They deserve answers, right? So now, it shouldn't take students that are it shouldn't take a group of former alumni, I should say, putting together a report on how the process works because you wouldn't tell us. You know what I mean? Like it's just not like it shouldn't be the case.
Right. And so, like, going forward, you hit the reset button, he gets hired. Could you give the guy a chance to do his thing, or he's dead in the water to you?
I mean, he's not dead in the water to me because, I mean, again, if he's the guy that gets forced on everyone, then, it's the same thing of, it's the same thing of we've all got a vested interest in it. So we want to see him succeed. So at that point, I mean, you hold him accountable, you continue to pay attention, you continue showing up to trustees meetings, you continue to ask questions, and you don't let up on it so that if he does great things at YSU, I'll be the first one to line up to apologize to the guy. I'll be the first one to line up to the Board of Trustees to apologize for criticizing it. I'm never going to apologize for criticizing making decisions in the dark, because that's not even something I do as a political party chair. My meeting, I encourage people to come to our meetings, even if they're not members of our central executive committee. They're all open to the public. So I'm never gonna apologize for criticizing the process, but I'll apologize for criticizing the fact that I don't have a lot of faith in the guy. No, and it goes back to what I was talking about. I assume positive intent with everybody until I have a reason not to. And, at the end of the day, whether I want to be in the boat with him or not, if he's the president of YSU, I'm in the boat with the guy. So I don't want the boat that I'm in to sink. So,
yeah. Well, your passion is admirable. I love how you speak about things, and I think your pressure is very valuable on everything. I hope that you never let up on, putting your side of the pressure, and just like on the other side, putting their pressure. And I think we all benefit from what you guys do out there. So keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you coming and talking with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Just shoot me a text, or, like I said, I don't check Facebook Messenger as often as I used to, thanks to some of the nasty grams I get. But I do check my phone very regularly. So anytime you want me to come down, if I can make it, I will.
Beautiful. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe.